Hi everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar on ad copy that will sell your ads. Today's session is going to be around 30 minutes long, and we'll have time to go over any questions that you might have at the end. If you want to ask a question, then we'll have a QR code on the screen shortly, or you can just join at slido.com using the code 129335. So I'll now hand over to your host for this morning's session, which is one of our senior PPC specialists, Jamie.
Thanks, Johnny, for the introduction. As Johnny said, if you want to ask any questions throughout this session, scanning this QR code, it'll be across every other slide in the presentation, so you won't miss it if you are a bit late to joining. As Johnny said, I'm one of the senior PPC specialists here at TAG. I work in the Google team. You might recognise me from a few of your campaigns if you're joining from the client side. So today's session will probably be quite Google heavy. It's probably part one of a two-part series, and we'll have a social session focusing on the kind of similar qualities over on the social side as well coming up soon. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. But we'll get started on the slides. So the first slide here, I want to just, before we kick off anything and dive into the kind of the main part of today's webinar, I just thought it'd be quite important to cover the main objectives of ad copy, just so that we're on the same page and make sure that we know what we're actually trying to achieve when we're trying to write our ad copy. So in a nutshell, I've got it's broken down into three parts here. The main objective of any ad copy really is to firstly filter out any kind of unqualified or irrelevant traffic. As you can imagine, the audience size across Google Ads especially is pretty big. Your keywords can be quite generic at times, so when people are searching for those keywords, they're not maybe necessarily the most qualified for your exact product or your exact event. So making sure our ad copy is as relevant as possible is a really good way of filtering out anybody that's irrelevant and making sure they don't click on your ad. Secondly, we also want to manage the audience expectations with our ad copy. So that's making sure that you're putting across exactly what a user can expect before or when they click on your ad. So you want to make sure that if you're promoting A, they expect A when they land on your website, not you're promoting A and they get B when they land on your website. So that's really key kind of objective of any ad copy, whether it's events based or any other kind of product out there. And then thirdly, the most important part, obviously, it's the beginning of your kind of conversions and sales cycle. So as soon as that person clicks on your ad, you're expecting them to go into your kind of sales cycle and eventually convert further down the line. So putting across the kind of right message within your ad copy at that kind of initial stage is really important in getting those people into the funnel and further down into the sales cycle to convert. So that's your main objectives of ad copy. And also we'll just discuss why ad copy is so important as well. So we've touched upon a few points there, but across Google Ads, ad copy is becoming more and more important, especially as we kind of become more progressively automated across the platform. So as you know, or you might not know, that in Google Ads, we operate in a kind of auction-based environment where we're always bidding against people for similar keywords. And our ad copy is probably the easiest way for us to kind of gain one up on our competitors, make sure that we are getting the best message out there as possible in order to win the auction and win bids. As I said here, Google Ads is becoming more progressively automated, so our bidding strategies are now more automated. We're not manually putting in our bids, so we can't just try and progressively outbid our competitors, even if our ad copy isn't that great. The robots are becoming a lot smarter, but what they can't understand is user intent or consumer behavior. So that's why having really good ad copy is so important. Because although the robots are maybe taking over some other side of Google Ads in a positive way, they don't have that ability to understand the intent behind a user search or like how they're behaving online. So we can really hone in on that kind of human management element of ad copy to make sure that the messaging that we're putting across has the best chance of converting and understanding kind of where the user is at in their kind of stage of the funnel or the intent behind all their searches. I want to also touch upon, before we dive into kind of the kind of first main section, on an element called quality score, because it's something that we'll reference quite a bit throughout. Quality score is kind of Google's rating of your overall experience, both from an ad perspective and a landing page perspective, when a user searches on for your keywords. So it takes 3 factors, which I've put on the screen here: your ad relevance, your landing page experience, the 2 I've just mentioned, and also takes a third one, so your expected click-through rate. And that's just calculated based on the average kind of click-through rate of your account as a whole. And in theory, that should improve over time if your ad relevance is high and your landing page experience is high. But in a nutshell, quality score, it can seem quite complicated at first, but if you break it down into each 3 factors, you can really just break it down into kind of 3 questions that you should ask yourself when you're writing your kind of ads for quality score. So obviously scoring high in all 3 of these categories is really important. It kind of goes on a scale of 1 to 10. And obviously we always want to try and be as close to 10 as possible. Anything between 8 and 10 we tend to see perform the best, as you can imagine. So when it comes to your expected click-through rate, the question here is, how likely is someone to click on your ad when Google serves it for the keyword to type in? So as your click-through rate across the whole account gets better, that the expected click-through rate score should be a lot higher. Ad relevance, the one that we'll probably focus on mostly today. Does the ad make sense to appear when someone searches for a particular keyword? And then landing page experience, does the information on the landing page correspond with what the kind of ad is offering, and vice versa? So making sure that your ad is as relevant to the keyword as well as the landing page. So yeah, scoring high in all 3 of these factors is important. But as you can probably guess from the title of today's webinar, ad relevance is the one that we're probably going to focus on the most here. And then just a reminder here, so our ad copy is really one of the kind of the main fundamentals of any kind of successful PPC campaign. There's 4 kind of fundamentals that we always focus on when we run PPC campaigns here at Tag. And in theory, if you have really carefully selected your keywords, you have really compelling ads and like relevant ads mixed with your relevant landing page, so you're sending people to the right landing page, you should be able to achieve conversions at a low CPA. And then, yeah, just making sure that our ads are aligned with the intent behind a user's search query is really the most important kind of part of making sure that our quality score is as high as possible. And with having high quality scores, it also means that you pay less per click. And that's how you kind of win the auctions as well. Having a high quality score, you pay less per click, and that will drive your conversions at very low cost per acquisition in comparison to if you've got low quality ads, you'll pay a lot more. You'll probably get less conversions as well and less clicks. So making sure that our ads are as compelling as possible really is one of the kind of main fundamentals of any PPC campaign. So now that we know we're focusing on making our ads relevant, how do we actually do that? So the main way that we do that here at Tag is really focusing on kind of where the user is in the PPC funnel. So we'll cover that in a bit more detail going forward, but really as people move down the funnel, their searches become a lot more kind of focused on what they're trying to achieve. At the top, it's a bit more generic. They're maybe doing some research, and as they move down the funnel, their intent becomes a lot more targeted, and that allows us to tailor our messaging based around that. So yeah, we can use that knowledge to our advantage when it comes to writing this copy. And then obviously, depending on where they are in the funnel, we can highlight kind of information and USPs based on what they might respond best to, depending on where they are in the funnel. So I've broken down some examples of each kind of stage of the 3 kind of main stages of the funnel, broken into 3 areas: the intent behind the user's search, the kind of behavior that you might expect from the audience, and then the best practices for the ad copy at that stage. And then I've provided some real life examples of some of our ad copy that we have noticed work really well for each stage of the funnel. So starting with middle of the funnel, The intent behind these kind of user searches they're kind of in that early stage of discovering your brand. They probably are in the research phase, as we would brand it. They're really wanting to kind of look around. They maybe don't know what the solution to their problem is. They just know they have a problem. And they're just searching around for the way to solve that problem. So the behavior here is they have very little brand loyalty. They, like I said, they're researching if they hope to find a solution. They're not really ready to commit to anything yet, and there's a lot of higher kind of search volume here. So there's a lot more competition within the auction, as you can imagine. So again, making sure our ad copy is as strong as possible at the middle of the funnel level is key, to not only kind of outbid the competition, but it brings your click costs down a lot more as well by making sure that our ad relevance is there. So if we look at the example on the left here, we can see a lot of our ad copy best practices are in play already. So we, in the middle of the funnel, one of the main things we want to do is showcase our key USPs. So we want to show the user that we actually have a solution to their problem. So you can see the search up the top there is battery innovations, and you know, in the headline 3 there, we've got the latest battery innovations, and we've also said that in the description there, it's an event for people looking to keep up on pace with industry news. We also want to highlight why they should choose you over any competitors with kind of brand reliability messaging. So you can see there in the description, we've highlighted that this is the #1 event within Europe, and it's must attend. So that just messaging like that might help you get one over on your competitors who are maybe not making use of that kind of messaging. And then, as always, we want to make sure our user's keyword is present within our ad copy. That goes back to our ad relevance and our quality score. So making sure that our keyword is always part of our kind of middle of the funnel ad copy will really boost that quality score. So you can see in headline 3 there, we've got the latest battery innovations. The keyword itself that people are searching for and we're bidding on is battery innovations. So that's just a really close relationship. And obviously we'll make sure that the page that we're pushing people to as well has something to do with battery innovations on it, just making sure that relevance flows throughout everything that we're doing. And one common theme across all ad copy that we need to try and make sure is there, it's present, is making sure that our brand name is in headline 1 and our call to action is in headline 2. So you can see here, and you'll see across through all the other examples that the show brand always is in headline 1 and the call to action is in headline 2. So book your pass today is our call to action here. And that's just because we're not always guaranteed, to show all 3 headlines. So making sure that at least the brand is present and the call to action is there means that even if the 2 headlines were to show, there's still some sort of kind of clear message of what the user's expected to do when clicking on our ads. So we're making sure that the expectations there are correct. Moving on to bottom of the funnel, the intent here is slightly different. So people here have probably most likely done the research. They know the solution to their problem is attending an event. They might just not know what event to attend. So they'll be considering your brand amongst others to fulfill their need. The behavior here is, like I said, they're ready to make that decision. They know they want to attend an event within your industry. They probably don't have any brand loyalty, or they might have just a slight bit of brand loyalty. And they'll be searching for kind of event-specific terms related to your industry. So you can see in the example here, it's another battery event kind of ad, and the keyword here is battery event. Best practices here really is to highlight kind of highlight the value to the user. So maybe that's the number of attendees, number of exhibitors, how much the ticket costs, the number of speakers. These are all things that you can highlight, especially if there's a lot of competition for these keywords. Maybe your event you can see this event here has 37+ hours of education. Maybe your competition only has 20, for example. So you want to make sure if that is the case, you're calling that out. especially if these people are doing their research. That might be a deciding factor. So again, it's just making sure that you're calling out what's valuable to that user at that stage of the funnel. This sort of messaging definitely works a lot better for bottom of the funnel in comparison to middle of the funnel. Obviously, the innovation-based or keywords that we used within our headlines there respond a lot better to middle of the funnel users. And again, you can see here we've got kind of the user's keyword present within our ad copy as well, and we'll also have the brand name in headline 1 and a strong call to action in headline 2. And then onto branded ad copy. So the intent here, these users are really most likely aware of your brand, unless they've discovered your brand just by chance. But most of the time, these users have attended your event before, or they have discovered it from earlier stages of the funnel from doing their research. And the behavior here, they really want an easy and quick transaction process. They might be expecting some sort of loyalty discount, and they tend to probably convert a lot later in the campaign in comparison to maybe bottom of the funnel and middle of the funnel, where it might be a wee bit earlier on in the campaign. We always are aware that maybe the last 2 weeks of your campaign will be where we expect to get the majority of your branded conversions from. So we can maybe even tailor messaging towards that in the last 2 weeks. And also take that into consideration as well. So the messaging on the left here, we actually ran quite early on to branded users. And you can see here that we've put that there are limited spaces available, so that even though we expect a lot of branded traffic to convert later, just because that's how it trends normally, if they're seeing this message and seeing that there's only limited spaces available, they might convert sooner rather than later, bringing their cost per acquisition down at a much earlier date than we usually tend to see within the last 2 to 3 weeks. So one of the main best practices here also is that we can send these users directly to the registration page, because we know that there's a high chance of them converting, and they really want just the quickest process to making that transaction as possible. So if we can cut out the pages in between that have maybe more information on the event that would benefit a middle of the funnel user or even a bottom of the funnel user, if we can cut that out, then it makes their life a lot easier, and they're more likely to just go on, directly convert, and then attend the event. So that's one of the main best practices really we've seen work well for branded search. You don't really need to send them to any kind of informational based pages. You can just send them directly to the registration page, and that works especially well if it's like a third-party registration page. And I've mentioned call to action quite a few times, and having a strong call to action in headline 2, and that resonates through all of our ad copies, dependent, no matter where you are in the funnel. We always want a strong call to action, which basically matches each stage of the funnel as well. So based on some analysis we've done in-house, we can see that the following call to actions actually have the most, the highest conversion rate overall. The first one, or the first two really, are quite similar in terms of conversion rate. The top one being dynamic countdown. So these are your headlines that dynamically count down towards the start date of your event. So you can set them out for as long as you want, but they tend to work best within the last 14 days. So 14 days out from the event, we'll set the dynamic countdown, and it'll count down every day. So 14 days, 13 days, and then it'll count down as it gets closer to hours to go. And those tend to perform really, really well. As you can see, they have the highest conversion rate overall. Underneath that, we have register for free. Again, this performs really well for us because there's a free element, which people tend to respond really well to. So maybe not so much for kind of paid delegate tickets, where we know that the cost per acquisition for those tends to be quite higher in general, and the conversion rate tends to be a bit lower, just because there's a paid element. But knowing and calling out from the start that you can register for free tends to get a really good response rate in terms of call to action. Last chance to register works quite similarly to your dynamic countdowns. Maybe we can introduce that within, or we would maybe run that against like a dynamic countdown just to see which one gets the best performance for that particular event. So again, just calling out that this is the last chance to register creates a wee bit of urgency within that audience and tends to convert really well. And then early bird discount, that's kind of similar to last chance to register, but we run that at the start of the campaign. Calling out that these people can save by acting early tends to work really well as well. And we'll touch upon that in a few slides time when we kind of go into kind of the process behind why that works. And then lastly, the fifth of the top 5 is sign up for free, which is very similar to register for free. It's the exact same concept. If you're calling out that these people can get this for free, they're most likely going to, there's a lot in it for them because it's not very much effort to get a lot back for free. So it's definitely worth, if it is a free event, calling that out and making sure that they know that if they convert now, it's free. And you can see the conversion rates across all 5 of these are really high. So we've talked a lot about relevance and how we can make our ads as relevant as possible, but there's a whole other layer behind ad copy that I think is really important to discuss, and it's based really around kind of behavioral economics, the kind of fundamentals of behavioral economics, and what's something that's called nudge theory. And I know that maybe sounds quite technical and really kind of out there, but it's quite a basic concept, and we'll break it down into a few kind of areas in a second. But nudge theory really is basically getting somebody to do something you need them to do with just a little bit of kind of persuasion. So basically just nudging them in the right direction. It's important though that we use this for the right reason. We shouldn't really be like installing fear or trying to intimidate these people, and we shouldn't also do it for our immediate personal gain. So it really needs to benefit them as well as benefit you. So that goes back to kind of the free registration. You want to call that out that it's free. They're going to get this for free. It benefits them because they're getting a ticket, but also benefits you because you are getting an attendee for your event. So I've said here a nudge can take shape in many forms, and this breaks it down into a really kind of key understandable kind of graph. So nudge theory, like I said, is part of behavioral economics. So there's 4 fundamentals of behavioral economics that we tend to refer to when we are writing any of our ad copy. So I'll cover these in general, and then I'll show how they relate to our ad copy and what we do across the kind of events PPC industry specifically. So first of all, we've got social proof, and this really plays on the fact that people kind of love that herd mentality feeling. So if we see a large group of people doing something, or we know that there's a large group of people doing something, we immediately want to assume that behavior and reflect and mirror it almost, and be part of that kind of that thing that's happening. So yeah, it's based on people assuming that actions that others do reflects correct behavior in any given situation. So like I said, I've got a few examples of what that might look like across PPC that I'll show to you in a few moments' time. To the right there, we've got anchoring. This plays upon the fact that as humans, nothing has a value until we actually give it one. So the most common example that we use across PPC here would be your early bird promotion. And it basically plays upon the fact that if we see that we're getting something for one price and it used to be another price, or we're getting it now and it's going to be a different price, we latch onto that first kind of number, and it really makes us want to kind of convert then rather than now, because we know we're getting the best deal, even though sometimes it might never have been that price before, and people are just anchoring it against one other thing. We only know that it's this price now, and it looks like a good deal based on the information that it's anchored next to. So that's a really effective one. Framing, you might recognize this from the promotion that we've done across social. So framing, really, this is one of my favorite ones. So it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So the easiest way to describe this is Would you rather eat ice cream that's 80% fat-free or 20% fat? They're the exact same thing, just framed in a completely different way. And I just think it's great. We see it literally everywhere we go now. Everything is 80% fat-free or 50% fat-free, even though that's literally 50% fat as well. So yeah, it's really an interesting one. And yeah, our decisions here are swayed depending on just how something is presented to us. And I just think that one's one of the most powerful kind of fundamentals that we can use within our ad copy. And the last one is scarcity. So this is just probably one of the most common ones as well, our FOMO theory, or fear of missing out theory. We use this one across pretty much all campaigns. And that's basically the most common one is our countdown and urgency-based messaging, which you can see when we look at the call to actions, is some of our best performing, or is the best performing. So using the countdown messaging to introduce scarcity to our campaigns is the best way to do that. And it basically plays on the fact that we place much higher value on something that is limited in time or quantity, rather than something that's in abundance or like long lasting. So at the start of a campaign, if we know that there's plenty of tickets left, we'll probably wait till there's not many tickets left, just with the way that we're programmed in our brains. So that's why it's important to make sure that we're trying to pull as many of these fundamentals into our ad copy as possible when we're writing it. So what might that look like across PPC ads? So the easiest way that I feel when it comes to writing our ad copy for behavioral economics is to have these questions on board, and ask these questions. And you can take these questions and kind of ask them yourself if you're working with us, and we send across ad copy. Make sure that you refer to these and feel free to kind of quiz us on them and say, how can we bring more like scarcity or social proof into our ad copy? So first one is social proof. You should ask yourself, how can I make the user feel like they aren't the only one making this choice? Scarcity, how can I communicate the time sensitivity and quantity of this product? Anchoring, how can I convey the benefits compared to the first piece of information received? And then framing, how can I frame the product, service, or proposition in the best way possible? So I have some examples here of all four of those in play. These are all made up events, as you can see, but it's really taking the kind of best practice to the max here, and just to make sure that the point is put across of what that might look like. So with social proof, you can see here that we've called out that there's 80% returning attendees for that year. We've also made use of the rating extension, so it's got a 4-star rating. Yeah, and we've called again that 80% of previous attendees are returning for 2020. Don't miss out on this event. So that basically social proof is really present there, showing that there's a lot of people already returning to this event, so we don't want to not be part of the herd. You can also see that there's over 3,000 tickets already sold, so that's a large enough number for me to go, if I've not bought a ticket yet, I better go, because I don't want to miss out. Again, there's a bit of kind of scarcity there as well, kind of fear of missing out. Those two kind of match up quite well. Anchoring, as I mentioned before, early bird is really the best example of that. So we've called out that you're getting a super early bird deal here. You're saving $200 off the regular price, and then we've anchored the two prices together there in the description. So get your tickets for just $30 instead of $230 today. So you're putting the current price against the future price there, so that people know I should probably act now, because I'm going to get charged an extra $200 further down the line. So that's a great, maybe a bit of an extreme example of anchoring there, but it's just to get the point across of how you could make it work for your event. Scarcity, like I said, this is mostly just to get a bit of urgency into your audience. So we've called out here that there's 98% of tickets sold already. So and then flipped it on the other side and said there's only 2% of tickets remaining. So again, probably a bit of framing there as well. Don't miss out on the best-selling event of the year as well. So, yeah, saying that there's only 2% of tickets remaining really gets the urgency going. 98% of tickets already sold as well will get a good response. And then finally, framing. We've also called out here that there's guaranteed new business. But the main kind of piece of framing here is within the description. So every 9 in 10 of our exhibitors claim to have doubled their customer base since exhibiting. So that'll get a much better response than if we said 1 in 10 of our exhibitors didn't get any, didn't double their customer base, even though it's the exact same thing. Saying 9 in 10 do, we'll get a much, much better response, and we'll get a lot more exhibitor leads in through that way. So that's kind of the two main topics I wanted to cover today. So we've got our ad relevance and then our kind of behavioral economics and how those two can work together when we're writing our ad copy for Google. So I've just summarized everything from today into some key takeaways, and then I'll pass back on to Johnny, who can moderate any questions that you guys have asked throughout the session. So firstly, when it comes to writing our ad copy, we always want to put ourselves in the user's shoes when it comes to when we are writing our ad copy. Secondly, we want to increase our ad relevance by making sure our keywords are always present within our copy. If we increase our ad relevance, our quality scores will be a lot higher, we'll pay a lot less per click, and we'll also get the one up on our competitors. As I've mentioned, our brand name should be displayed in headline 1, and we should have a strong call to action in headline 2. Just a reminder, that's just because we're not always guaranteed to show all 3 headlines within Google Ads. So if the 3rd headline does get cut off, we at least know that our users are seeing our brand name and they know what action to take when they go onto the website. Number 4, keep the 4 fundamentals of behavioral economics in your mind when drafting your ad copy. And again, feel free to quiz us on those if we send across any ad copy. And you think that there's maybe a kind of room for making better use of these kind of fundamentals, and we're more than happy to hear that and kind of discuss that with you. And then number 5, if ad relevance is letting our quality score down, we can revisit your copy in order to make it a kind of much closer match to the target keyword. So that, again, that goes back to just making sure that our keywords are present within our ad copy. And that's everything. So yeah, thanks very much for listening today. I'll just pass back on to Johnny, and he can run through any questions that you may have popped in whilst I've been talking.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So yeah, let's just jump straight into the questions. So the first one we got was an anonymous one at the top there. Where do we find quality score?
That's a good question. So quality score is actually something that is found within the Google Ads platform itself. It's found at the ad level. So obviously the kind of hierarchy of the Google Ads platform starts at account, then campaign, then ad group, and then your ads and keywords sit under there. So once you click into your ads, you should be able to see kind of what the quality score is and see the kind of rating out of 10. And then obviously you'll get some feedback as well, kind of saying why your quality score is low. It could be that your landing page isn't relevant. It could be because your click-through rate isn't great, and you can just work on getting your click-through rate up over time. But the most common is that it's not relevant. Your kind of keyword relevance isn't there. So yeah, you find it in the platform. We can always feed that back to you as well if the quality scores are low, why we might maybe want to introduce new copy, and then obviously update you if the quality score is getting better.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Second question. I noticed that the second sentence on the middle funnel wasn't title case. Would you advise not using title case for ads?
That's a good question. We actually would always advise using title case. This example, although it did perform well, it's a really good example of one that did perform well. That was just a client's preference. Their call to action always needs to be in in the sentence case because it's like that on the website. So we were just mirroring kind of their brand standards as well within that example, but we usually keep the headlines and of the sentences in. Sorry, I was thought that you were mentioning headline there. Sentences we do tend to keep in sentence case. Headlines we always keep in title case, just because the kind of, that's how a normal Google search result would look as well. If you look for just organic search results, the sentence tends to be in sentence case, and then the headlines tend to be in headline case, in title case, sorry.
Cool. Third question, should you put early bird discounts in middle of the funnel ads or only in remarketing ads?
I think there's maybe it's maybe worth always testing to see if your early bird discount gets some traction in middle of the funnel. I think with things like our responsive search ads, and with those being obviously pushed out a lot more aggressively now because expanded text ads are actually being retired across Google Ads soon. With responsive search ads, there's a lot more room to test different headlines. So for middle of the funnel, we definitely could put early bird discounts in our responsive search ad because we have 15 headlines to fill there, and obviously let Google's machine learning kind of optimize to what gets the best response. I wouldn't always say that we only use early bird discounts within remarketing though. I think there's a really good argument case to use them for bottom of the funnel, especially if that's going back to what we've mentioned about trying to get one up on your competitors. You might have an early bird discount in place, whereas your competitor might not. And if people are doing the research between your event and their event, that might be the deciding factor. So I wouldn't just use them for remarketing. I would maybe trial them across maybe the lower stages of the funnel, especially brand and bottom of the funnel. And then, like I said, you can always try and include the early bird in your kind of responsive search ads as well.
That's great. Thanks, Jamie. There is one question. I don't know if you want to just scroll down on the screen there. There's just one that's cut off. So are there any call to actions that you'd recommend not using? I know you spoke about some that you would use and have been successful. Are there any that you wouldn't recommend using?
I wouldn't say that there's any specific ones I would recommend not using. It really does depend on kind of the call to actions that are on your website as well. For example, like goes back to relevance as well. You want to make sure that and the kind of objectives of ad copy, you want to make sure that you're putting across exactly what a user can expect when they land on your website. So for example, if your call to action was register now, and then you got onto the website and it was book a ticket, it kind of does cause a bit of kind of confusion. So I wouldn't say there's any call to actions that I would recommend not using. I think it's just making sure that they're relevant to the event that you're promoting. I would also make sure that you're trying to make as much use of the kind of 30 character limit that we have for our headlines in there. So like anything that's short, like register, it's probably not worthwhile using instead of register for a ticket or register for free. You want to make as much use of that space as possible.
Cool, that's great. Thanks, Jamie. We're actually out of time to finish the questions. So I'll just wrap up here by saying thanks very much for joining. We will answer that final question when we send over the on-demand link. And any other questions that you want to post through to Slido, feel free. You can also send any further questions to Jamie, which is jamie@tagdigital.co.uk. But that's all from us. So thanks very much for joining, and we'll see you for the next one.
Thanks, guys.